Lecture 11, Part 3. Let's catch up with the next slide. Let's try that again. There we go. Alright, so there is an amazing amount of major legislation passed early in the Roosevelt administration. They call it the 100 days. So remember I told you, Roosevelt had been governor of New York, which is a pretty big state. They'd had a chance to try out some ideas. They had a bunch of concepts in mind when they took power, and because the Democrats had swept the election so well, they had enough majority in both houses of Congress they could just pass legislation without too much trouble. So I already told you about the emergency banking bill. Okay, here's a reform. Okay, so I told you these programs, some are designed to help recover, some are reforms. Here's a reform. You get the Truth and Securities Act. Okay? Now what the Truth and Securities Act does is requires businesses that are selling stock, and not all businesses sell stock, some are privately owned, but if you want to sell stock to the public, you have to release certain financial information to where investors can make an informed decision. Okay? So if you wanted to buy stock in the XYZ widget company, every year they have an annual report that comes out, and you can get the copy of this. Or if you're a stockholder, you'll get a copy. Nowadays, it's usually delivered electronically. I used to get them in the mail every year from Sears. I would get this big, thick, boring report that only stockbrokers and accountants really understand. But you can look at this report. It says, how much money does the company have on hand? Whatever liabilities, what monies do they owe? How many properties do they own? Whatever assets, whatever liabilities. This allows investors to make an informed decision on whether to buy that stock or not. Okay? And so this is partially part of the Truth and Securities Act. If you want to stay a private company, you can stay secretive. But if you want to sell your stock on the stock market, you have to let people know, just financially where you stand. And that's passed in 1933. It's followed up by the Securities Exchange Act. A little later, 1934, establishes the Security Exchange Commission. That's the SEC. Okay? The Securities Exchange Commission is a federal regulatory body that monitors the stock market and watches for people trying to bend the rules or nefarious behavior or suspicious activities. Okay? And so if you do something untoward, you might draw the attention of the SEC. Now this picture of this fellow with the eyeglasses, it's like the first head of the SEC, as I understand, a guy by the name of Joseph Kennedy. He's most famous for having a number of sons who went into politics. So Joseph Kennedy had made a fortune in the stock market. He kind of knew all the tricks, all the ways to play the system, and so he's put in charge of the SEC because he knows what kind of things can be done. It's kind of like if you want to test your computer security, you hire a hacker, to see if he can get in. Joseph Kennedy knows how to manipulate the system to make money, and so he can perfect person to try to keep an eye on what's going on. Okay? So that's a reform. It's designed to help prevent another Great Depression, okay, by protecting the stock market for unscrupulous activity. Okay? Now, I told you that there's one of the 3 R's is relief. Programs designed to relieve the suffering. Bunches of these. There are a ton of New Deal agencies. Of course, in my research for the dissertation, I came across agencies I'd never heard of. I mean, there's a whole bunch of these. We're just going to cover a few of the more famous ones just to give you an idea of what all's going on. So, one of the things that's passed is the Federal Emergency Relief Act in 1933. It's kind of like, in England, they call it being on the dole. It's basically unemployment insurance. They pay you if you don't have a job. This is a temporary short-term emergency. It says why it says Emergency Relief Act. It's not really intended to be permanent. What the government does is give, I believe it was $500 million. Let me grab my notes real quick. Yeah, $500 million, say my notes, that was then given basically to the state governments to set up, ways to get money to unemployed to help them out. Okay, so the actual procedures might have varied by state to state depending on what the state decided to do with it. Okay, but you can't just be throwing around $500 million year after year after year. They have to. What they really need is for people to find actual work. Okay, so the Federal Emergency Relief Act is designed as kind of like a short-term influx of cash out into the economy to help people, pay their rent or buy some groceries or maybe pay some of their bills. Okay, and help tide them over. It's not meant as to be a long-term solution by any stretch of imagination. What they're looking for is ways to get people back to work. People who are working have money, and then they buy things, and this can help stimulate the economy. So, let's talk about one of the most famous New Deal programs. If you were to stop somebody in the street and say, "Hey, can you name a New Deal program?" First of all, they'd probably look at you funny. But if they could name one of the most famous ones is the CCC, the Civilian Conservation Corps. And I believe this was an idea that Roosevelt had worked with in New York State on a state basis. What the Civilian Conservation Corps did basically was this. Young men, I think 18 to 25 if I recall, would join the CCC. They would then go off to CCC camps, most of which were located in rural areas because they do conservation work, although there was a CCC camp in Dallas. But don't ask me a lot of particulars because honestly I don't know. But they're more likely to be out in like a national forest or national park. Hang on, I get some pictures here for the CCC. Okay. All right. So they basically give this thing to the Army to run. I don't think the Army really wants the job, but they have the trucks and the tents and the stuff. Let me get you a picture of a CCC camp. Here's one. See, here's a lot of tents and stuff. Here's how this might work. Okay, you join the CCC. You go to a CCC camp. Maybe it's located in a national forest somewhere. You help do conservation work. You clear away dead trees. You plant saplings in burned out areas. The national park, you might dig, drainage ditches or build a hiking trail or maybe a small, cabin that hikers could stay at overnight. Okay, so it's hard physical type work, and so it's young men. Okay, 18 to 25. So you live in a barracks with the other workers. Okay, you get up every morning, you get your shovels, and you walk back into the forest and dig up dead brush or plant saplings or whatever. It's good, honest work. It's not exactly the kind of thing the national government might normally be worried about, but it's a way to get money to people's hands. Now, you're a young man. You're getting this pay. I think it was, I don't know, $34 a month or something like that. But your needs are provided for, right? You're living in a barracks. The Army is feeding you. So what do you do with this money? And you're living out there in the boonies in a CCC camp. What do you do with this money? Well, you send it home to your parents, right? Because maybe dad's unemployed and you got a younger sibling at home and they're trying to make ends meet. So you save a little bit of your money, to buy a hamburger or a Coke every now and then, but most of it goes home to the parents. And I think that was actually part of the deal. I think you were required to send some of it home. You couldn't just spend it all, if memory serves me correctly. I need to read a book on the CCC one of these days. But they're one of the most famous programs, partially because a lot of people went through it. Something like, hang on, I'll check the notes. It says here, yeah, you made $28 a month. And 2.25 million Americans worked in the CCC at one point or another, not all at the same time, but you passed through it. Okay, so it's a way to get money into people's hands. Okay, all right. Now, are there other parts of this as well? Well, maybe. First of all, you're helping preserve the Puritan work ethic. Okay, Federal Emergency Relief Act. And maybe you're just giving people money, but I mean, after a while, do people just kind of come to expect that? They get lazy. The other problem is a lot of people want to feel that they're contributing, that they're doing something useful. Okay, it sounds great to just sit around all day with the government giving you money, but I mean, honestly, a lot of people like to feel that they're doing something useful with their lives. They're doing something constructive, and so the CCC helps protect the work ethic. It's people don't necessarily want charity; they want jobs, and this is a way to get them to them. All right. Now, is there another deeper, maybe meaning hidden here too? Kind of, yeah. What group of people, as a rule, this is a stereotype, but as a rule, what kind of folks tend to cause a lot of trouble in society? Young males 18 to 24 with time on their hands and nothing constructive to do, and they get bored and they start looking to do things. I mean, think about it. What kind of people are drag racing on the streets at night, or knocking over liquor stores, or tend to get involved in gangs? It's usually not people my age, and it's usually not the women. Yeah, it's a gender stereotype, but usually not a lot of women out there robbing 7-Elevens. It's usually young men, especially if they're unemployed and desperate. Okay? And so the CCC might be a way to relieve some of that tension by channeling these aggressive tendencies into useful work. Okay, the old saying, the devil finds work for idle hands. So one way to keep that from happening is keep people busy. Right? And so maybe the CCC was partially intended to keep a lot of potential troublemakers out of trouble. Okay? So it works on many, many, many levels. Okay? Anyway, that's one of the most famous of the New Deal agencies. It's a work program. Okay? But there's more. There's a lot of work programs involved with the New Deal. One is the Public Works Administration. Okay? The Public Works Administration does big, big infrastructure projects. Things like bridges and dams. Things that private enterprise wouldn't be able to afford to build. Or, if you're going to build a bridge, make it a toll bridge, how long would it take you to return your investment? So the national government will come in and use money to build some of these big infrastructure projects. Okay? Versus the two bridges in San Francisco, the Bay Bridge and the Golden Gate Bridge, sorry, were built around this time. Now, I don't know if those were PWA projects. It might have been one of the other New Deal agencies, but they were built during this time to help provide jobs and come up with useful things. In this case, a couple of bridges. I'll try to look that up and find out for you. Okay. There's also the Civil Works Administration. Now this was literally make work. This was a very short-lived program too. So somewhere after, like probably after the Federal Emergency Relief Act, the Civil Works Administration literally just paid people to do things like rake leaves in parks, pick up trash. Not really the kind of thing the national government usually is working on. Okay? But once again, it was a way to get money to people's hands and have them do something useful. Nowadays they might call it workfare. So this program didn't stick around very long because it was seen as just busy work, kind of like being in high school. But did I really just say that? But they'll pay people to do these small little tasks to help get some money out and help them make ends meet. Okay? So this program didn't last very long because it didn't really have a long-term potential. It was a way to just get some money out while we came up with more ideas. Okay? So I'm hitting the deadline on the time here. I'll stop this one and go on to the next slide in a minute.